Is it just me, or are Shaq Thompson and Frankie Luvu one of the most underrated linebacking duos going into the 2023 NFL season? I think that's the case. I'll tell you why right here on Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers with you every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday as we're still in off-season mode until July 17th, when we'll be back to your team every day. Our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter at Julian Council, where in 2 weeks on the 21st, the weekly Friday mailbag will be right back here on the Locked On Panthers podcast. Either at me or DM me over on Twitter at Julian Council. But of course, follow me first there at Julian Council on Twitter. All right, we're back into it. Our position evaluations this week so far, we've been talking about the defense, talk about the D-line. We also talk about the edge rushers on Wednesday. Now we're going to finish up our evaluation of the front seven by talking about the linebackers, in particular the inside linebackers here on the Carolina Panthers roster heading into the 2023 season as the Panthers transition into a 3-4 scheme under new defensive coordinator Ejiro Evero. So this is Pete Hansen, or Peter. He didn't really say whether he cared or had a preference of what you called him, but Peter Hansen, he is the inside linebacker coach, and he has two really good players that he gets to coach this year in Carolina, and two guys who I think may make up the most underrated linebacking core in the NFL. And one of those guys, Shaq Thompson, I think it has to be the biggest name in this position group. And really the only big story about Shaq is he's back. He is back here in Carolina after there was a lot of conversation about whether he would be back, considering that he had a massive cap hit, $24.5 million. And by cutting Shaq Thompson, the Carolina Panthers easily would have been able to get under the salary cap, but they would have had a massive hole in the middle of their defense in their defensive captain over the last couple of years in Shaq Thompson. And I quite frankly don't know what they would have done had they not brought back Shaq. And Shaq talked about how he wants to be here. These are his brothers. And this is a team that he wants to win a Lombardi trophy for and with, and that the market also just kind of wasn't there. You look at the running back market, not great. Look at the linebacker market, especially for off-ball inside linebackers like Shaq Thompson, not very good. So it wasn't like he had an opportunity to go elsewhere and make the kind of money he was making in Carolina. Now, the last couple of years, trying to open up some cap space and maneuver things, be able to sign certain players, the Carolina Panthers gave Shaq a lot of money. And because they did that, they put Shaq in kind of a precarious situation, and also the team in a precarious situation where they had to figure out, how are we going to rework this deal or come up with a new deal that's respectful of the talent and the player and the meaning that he has for the organization, but also helps the team be able to sign some other players like a Von Bell, like a Hayden Hurst, who can help the team heading in 2023. Well, they're able to do that by signing Shaq to a 2-year, $12.6 million contract with $8.5 million guaranteed. Also has a couple of million guaranteed coming up in the 2024 season, so should keep him on the roster for the next couple of years. And the Panthers did the trick of adding some void years, added 3 void years in the back end of his deal, which will end up being some dead money whenever Shaq departs, if he does depart during that time, or they'll have to use that with whatever kind of contract they sign him to. As far as the salary cap goes, and his cap hit, but Shaq Thompson being in Carolina, a very important deal for the Panthers. And it was one of the things I talked about on my offseason to-do list, that you got to find a way to keep Shaq. I don't know whether you cut him and then bring him back on a reduced deal, or if you rework his deal or sign him to a new deal. I don't know what they had to do, but they needed to bring back Shaq no matter what it took. And I'm glad that they were able to do that, because Shaq Thompson is someone who really knows what it's like to win in Carolina. He's one of the few guys who has seen this place and that stadium rocking when the team is on top of the world. He's also someone who has had to go through some really lean years over the last couple of seasons, and he's never a guy that you have seen complain. You've never seen a guy, he's not a guy who has been down and who has not been a leader. He's been everything that you would want out of a player at that position. I remember early on in his career when he was having to play behind Luke Kuechly and Thomas Davis. And there's people who are wondering, okay, we got this guy from Washington in the first round, but he's not really going out there making that massive impact because he's behind these guys. Like, when's it going to be his turn? And then once it was his turn, there's still people out there who didn't love the amount of money Shaq got in that deal and didn't understand, oh, why would the Panthers keep Shaq Thompson? Well, I think you would have some respect for Shaq Thompson now. The last 4 seasons, since Shaq Thompson has stepped into a starting role and really been the guy in the middle of that defense, especially when you had guys like Tahir Whitehead here in 2020. You had Jermaine Carter Jr. as a starter in 21. Shaq Thompson was the only linebacker that you could depend on. Now, the Panthers kept Denzel Perryman. Probably a different story than last year. Of course, a different story with the resurgence of Frankie Luvu. But the last 4 seasons, Shaq Thompson has had 109 tackles, 11 tackles for loss. That was back in 2019. In 2020, 114 tackles, 6 tackles for loss. In 2021, had 104 tackles, 9 tackles for loss. And then last year, the most tackles of his career, 135 tackles, 8 tackles for loss. Now, you like for Shaq to get it to the backfield and get the guys behind the line of scrimmage more often, but he's going out there head on a swivel, all like head on fire, hair on fire too. I mean, whatever you want to say, and going out there and getting after the opponent. And he's been really good. And he's also someone who you look at can be a mentor even to Bryce Young. He had talked about when he spoke to the media a couple weeks ago that he's been telling Bryce, hey, if a linebacker moves, this is what he's doing. And he's trying to see out of a quarterback just to help you moving forward. So Shaq Thompson, solid player, good leader, and some of the Carolina Panthers absolutely needed to bring back going into the season. I'm very happy that they did. And my hope, too, for Shaq is that he can remain healthy, have another big year, and he can be a Pro Bowler. I've said this for multiple guys now. When the team is good, like, you're going to need the offense to step up. If the team is good and the national media is paying attention to this team and fans also are paying attention to this team, you will see guys who will be Pro Bowlers. You'll see Derek Brown be a Pro Bowler. Brian Burns has already gotten the recognition, but other guys have not. I think Shaq Thompson, if he has another big year like he had last year, stays healthy, the team plays well, he can be a Pro Bowler. That's how many good players this team has on this defense. And he's someone who is very excited about going to a 3-4. You would think, okay, well, he's mainly been in the 4-3. He did have that 1 year in 19 when he became a full-time starter where he was playing into 3-4. Would he want to go back to that? He's excited about it. He's excited about the change, excited about the leadership, and especially when you have guys like Ejiro Evero calling him on a daily basis, and Pete Hansen calling him on a daily basis, and Frank Reich calling him on a daily basis, telling him as they were trying to figure out what they're going to do with his contract, hey, we want you here. We need you here in the middle of this defense. They didn't really have any other recourse. I don't know who they were going to bet on to step in and be the starter at an inside linebacker next to Frankie had Shaq not come back. But they let it known to Shaq very early that, hey, man, we need you on this roster. And I'm happy to have Shaq Thompson on the roster, and I expect another big year to Shaq Thompson heading into 2023, where 4 straight years he's had over 100 tackles, and he has been one of the leaders, if not the leader, of this defense here in Carolina. So a great addition, or, well, not really addition, but a great to keep him here heading into 2023. Now, what was a great addition was signing Frankie Luvu back in 2021. And when the Panthers did that, he came in as a special teams guy, and I don't think anyone expected what Frankie Luvu did last year in Carolina. How much better can Frankie Luvu get? We'll talk about that here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. Take your first swing at betting Major League Baseball on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets up to $200. That's right. Just bet $20 and you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 you can spend betting everything from the money line to over under to when's the next time Ronald Acuna is going to go yard, all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. No waiting around. That money's right there in your account. There's no better place to bet on the Major League Baseball than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get up to $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official betting partner of Major League Baseball. Raise your hand if you thought Frankie Luvu was going to have that kind of season last year. Seriously, raise your hand. And I will say this. There probably was at least one guy who's not related to Luvu, one person who's just a massive Frankie Luvu fan, had a number 49 jersey. There's probably one guy out there, especially on Twitter, who has some like, oh, Frankie Luvu fan account, who is saying, hey, Frankie Luvu, best linebacker in the NFL, about to show y'all this year in 2022. He's about to step up and be amazing. I'm sure there's at least one guy out there who did that. But the wide general public, Panthers fans, did y'all really, in your heart of hearts, see that coming? Now, seeing as far as like projecting that to happen and believing it would happen are two different things. Like, did you believe that he could have that potential? Fine, sure, maybe you believe that. But did you really, without a doubt in your mind, think that was going to happen? If you're saying yes, you're either that one guy I'm talking about or you were a damn liar, because that was not anything any of us really could have reasonably expected out of Frankie Luvu. Now, in 2021, you did see the flashes of a player who could really be a disruptor if given the opportunity. In 2021, Frankie Luvu played in 249 defensive snaps, which was 24% of the available snaps in the games that he appeared in. He also, in that year, was more of a special teams guy. As a core special teamer, he played in 71% of the special team snaps, playing in every single game there in 2016. So played 24%, about a quarter, or just sort of a quarter, of the defensive snaps in 2016. Had 43 tackles, 8 tackles for loss, 1.5 sacks. And for a guy who was a core special teamer and only played a quarter of the defensive snaps, those are really good numbers. So the question last year was, when we saw that Frankie Luvu was clearly going to be the starter, and this could be an argument when you look at the defensive or the outside linebackers, the edge rushers. When you look at the edge rushers, you can start to wonder, hey, what does it look like if Haynes, who played 41% of the snaps last year, what if it happens if he plays 80? Does his numbers jump up like Frankie Luvu's? Now, Frankie Luvu played far fewer snaps in 21 than what Marquise Haynes played last year in Carolina, and his jump was significant. He played 940 defensive snaps last year, which is 92% of the available snaps in the games he appeared in. He only played in 15 games, missing 2. He only played 17% of the special team snaps available to him in the games that he played. So he went from a core special teamer to a every down linebacker who barely played on special teams unless you really needed him out there in certain situations. He went from 43 tackles to 111 tackles in 2022. Had a team-high 19 tackles for loss. Brian Burns, probably the best defensive player on this roster, had 17 tackles for loss. Frankie Luvu had 19. Shaq had 8. Frankie had 19. And you look at that number and you watch the film, not really surprising because it felt like every single down, he was right there in the backfield. We knew Luke Kuechly knew the plays. Frankie Luvu's not out there running out, yelling out, oh, they're going to do this, they're going to do that. But he's seen as though the play is because he's always right there at the football and beating everyone, his man, getting to pass the line of scrimmage and getting the guy down the backfield. So he was great last year. I think one of the bigger surprising things was he had 7 sacks, had 1.5 the year prior, but he had 7 sacks. And as we talked about on Wednesday, who's going to fill in and be that edge rusher opposite of Brian Burns? Who's going to step up? Frankie Luvu is probably going to play more inside linebacker this year. I don't know how they're going to utilize him, if they're going to allow him to be on the outside, and it would make sense, especially if you're not going to bring in a veteran, to have Luvu be a part of the pass rushing game, considering that he was good at it, especially in the last part of the season last year, getting those 7 sacks. So for him to go from 43 tackles, 8 tackles for loss, 1.5 sacks, so 111 tackles, a team high 19 tackles for loss, and 7 sacks. That is something that I don't think anyone, other than Luvu and I guess the coaching staff, really foresaw happening a year ago. And I don't even know if Rule saw that. And you can go ahead and say for sure Matt Rule didn't see it, but that was a great signing. And I'll give credit really to Phil Snow, because when they were looking at Sam Darnold tape, they're looking at Jets tape and all that, they saw Luvu, felt like he was someone who can help them out special teams. And then we saw that throughout that season, Vikings game, that was special teams play, where you could see, even in the preseason, okay, this Luvu guy, Tasmanian Devil, is all over the place, has high energy. That's someone who could actually be a factor like full time on this team. And Frankie came out and said before last season that when he came to Carolina in 2021, his goal was to take a job, man. He's like, I'm coming here to take somebody's job. And Jermaine Carter Jr. made it easy for him, but he came out here, took Jermaine Carter Jr.'s job. and he became one of the best signings that Rule staff made over the last 3 seasons. Frankie Luvu was awesome. My thought too now is, how much better can he get? When you go from playing a quarter of the snaps to playing 92% of the snaps, are you going to do that again? Are you going to build off of that? Is he going to go from 141 tackles to 140? Is he going to go from 19 tackles for a loss, maybe to up to like 25 to maybe the 30? Is he going to get, if he's going to get an opportunity, he's going to get 10 sacks? I don't know. It feels just like, I would imagine his sack numbers probably go down, because I don't know if he's going to be utilized that much as a guy who's going to be after the passer. It would be smart if they do that. I just don't know if the scheme's going to call for him to do that as much as he did last year, where they were far more multiple. But again, Gerald Barrow said that it's the base, and that not every team is going to strictly play a 4-3 or a 3-3. They're going to play sub packages and have certain looks depending on the opponent that week. So depending on how the opponent looks, maybe Frankie Luvu goes out there and gets more sacks. I'm just going to guess that he's going to probably play more of it inside, and maybe he'll get some opportunities also at outside linebacker on pass rushing downs, which would make sense if this is the group they're going to keep out there at edge rusher heading into the season. I would believe that he would continue to make a major impact down in and down out this upcoming season at inside linebacker. And when you look at it too on this roster, he's probably the best bargain the Carolina Panthers have. Burns, he's getting $16 million this year, going to get paid soon. Brown, he's still a guy who hasn't gotten his money yet. He's going to get it soon. Next year he'll be playing on an $11.6 million deal. I mean, Horn, if he's healthy, bargain, but he's a first-round guy. Like, when you think about someone who you got off the street, probably did not expect this out of. They gave him a $1 million 1-year deal, and he's currently playing on a 2-year, $9 million contract. Got a $1 million roster bonus for being on the roster past a certain time this offseason. Outside of that, the money going into this year is not guaranteed. Like it should be. He should get every dime because he's earned it, and he's earned way more than that based off of his play. Like, if I was Frankie Luvu's agent, we are not playing football next year. Well, we would be playing, but we would be holding out. We would be saying, hey, you can see that. I need to see the money, because my client went out there and balled out. So I'm going to need to see some more money from my client before we touch the football field again. That's where I would be. I don't think Frank Luvu is going to do that. I would be surprised. But if I was his representation, I'd be telling him, no. You are not stepping on the field until they sign you to a long-term deal, because you were phenomenal last year, and you should absolutely be cashing in on your talents, your motor, and your ability to just wreak havoc every single down. I love Frankie Luvu. I look at him, I look at Shaq, and this looks like the most underrated linebacker duo in the NFL. Like, who talks about these guys on a national level? No one. I've seen Brian Baldinger of NFL Network bring up Luvu because he does his, his baldies, all breakdowns on Twitter and all that kind of stuff. I've seen him talk about him, but who out there outside of those guys are talking about him? It's gonna be great to be able to start the season week 2 on Monday Night Football against the Saints, then later on in the season get to play on Thursday night against the Bears, and who knows how things shake out later on, whether they play a Saturday game or they get another primetime game. If they flex things out, it would be great for the entire NFL to understand just how good of a player that Derek Brown is, that Jeremy Chin is, but especially how good of a player Frankie Luvu is for the Carolina Panthers this year. And speaking of Jeremy Chin and talking about how they might be able to utilize Frankie Luvu this year and pass rushing downs, it could be possible that you got Burns on one side. In the interior, you got Shaq Thompson. You bring in Jeremy Chin there. And then at outside linebacker, you utilize Frankie Luvu. So, hey, there's a free thought for you, Jero Vero, even though I'm sure that you probably have thought about this already. And, of course, you know exactly what you're going to be doing, and you don't need this idiot's opinion on what your defense should do in 2023. But I'm excited to see what it looks like. And, man, Frankie Luvu, if he's not a fan favorite, he should be, because that guy is everything that you want in a Carolina Panthers player, and he's someone that everyone can be a fan of based off what he's done last year and the year prior, and just what he's done as soon as he stepped here in Carolina and the way he has carried himself and gone about his business. Frankie Luvu, I tip my cap to you, brother. You are great. All right, so we talk about Shaq, we talk about Frankie. There's other guys in this linebacker room. Talk about the rest of the position group and what they may add going into this season in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. So the real headliners in this linebacker room, especially the inside linebacker room, as we're breaking it down here on the show today, it's Shaq Thompson and Frankie Luvu. Both those guys had over 100 tackles last year. Shaq had 135, 8 tackles for loss. Frankie 111 tackles, team high, 19 tackles for loss and 7 sacks. You know what you're going to get out of those guys. Those guys stay healthy. The Panthers are going to have a dynamic duo there at inside linebacker, and I don't really see much reason to ever bring them off the field. Now, they are probably gonna get banged up a little bit at some point in time, because when you play linebacker, it's happened to Shaq, it's happened to Frankie last 2 years. They may miss a game, maybe two, but I don't really look at that being a serious issue and a big concern. Well, looking at the rest of the linebacker group, I do feel better about what they have behind these two than I did last year, because last season I didn't have much confidence in the depth, and it's still not necessarily the deepest group in or on the Panthers roster. But when you bring in a guy like Kamu Grugier-Hill, who started off last season in Arizona and then played in Houston, that does help you, because he can be both a special teamer and also someone who can be a backup linebacker and step up and help you in certain situations this upcoming season. Last year, when he started off the year in Arizona, he primarily was a special teamer. He played only 10% of of defensive snaps of the games that he played, but then he played 66% of the special team snaps in those games. Then when he was traded to Houston, he then became a key defender for the Texans, playing in 85% of defensive snaps in the games that he played, and then playing 0 special team snaps. So he comes in as a special teamer, but also someone who started for, yes, what was a very bad Houston Texans football team, but someone who has been a starter and has starter experience in the NFL, but is also someone who can come in and be a really good special teamer. So you have 2 linebackers who can both be helpful on special teams. You have Frankie Luvu, who you would not expect to play much special teams, if any at all this year. You have Kamu Grugier-Hill, who also helps you there defensively as someone who can come in and give those guys a blow or step in if either one of them goes out for any period of time, and also someone who can help you special teams. So Kamu Grugier-Hill, I think that is an improvement from where they were last year as far as depth goes for the Carolina Panthers. Brandon Smith, all the talent in the world coming out of the state of Virginia as a 5-star recruit, going to Penn State, supposed to replace Micah Parsons, and it never really happened for him. Now, fortunately, played well enough, has the physical tools and talent to where the Panthers decided we're going to use a 4th-round pick on this man. Now, last year, you saw a little bit in the preseason, but once season got here, he didn't really play at all. Had 8 tackles in 12 games, 1 start, filled in for Luvu, played 53 total defensive snaps, and he only played in 7% of the available snaps in those games in which he played. So did not get that much burn. I remember I had someone tweet at me a couple weeks ago. I was like, did I just dream that Brandon Smith had more of an impact? I was like, yes, sir, you did. Because if you look at what he actually did last year, the man barely played. And I will also bring up, too, that Steve Wilkes, who was the interim, who's now, of course, in San Francisco as a DC, he did point out that we need him to step up. That guy has talent. We need to see more out of him. James Franklin at Nebraska, at Penn State never got it, and so far the Panthers have not gotten it. Now, they have not necessarily needed it, and they're aided by Shaq and Frankie overall staying healthy, and now they have Kamu Grugier-Hill, who they can depend on as a backup and someone who can help them in special teams. But Brandon Smith, what are you going to see out of him this year? That's what I want to know. And when you think about it, too, if Frankie has another big year and the Panthers don't sign him to a deal, he's a free agent and he could be going to the highest bidder. And I would recommend, if I was his representation, as much as I want him here in Carolina long term, if Frankie Luvu has another season like he had last year or builds on it, then he needs to take as much money as possible. Hopefully it's here in Carolina. The Panthers should have the cap space to do it, but he should take as much money as possible, whatever his market is out there, because this is probably the only time he's ever going to get paid big time money in the NFL. So if that's the case, and you may lose Frankie Luvu, not trying to manifest this or say it's going to happen, just looking ahead to that's a player that you're going to have to pay. And think about it, you still got to pay Burns, you're going to have to pay Derek Brown, you're going to have to pay Jeremy Chin. There's other guys out there who need to get paid, and who knows how DJ Chark plays, may have to pay him. You see, it starts to add up, and who's going to be the priority. You would think Frankie Luvu is someone that you would want to keep around. If you don't keep him around long term, Brandon Smith, got to see something out of you, man. It's in the 4th round. That is a player that you think at least by year 3, would develop into someone who can really help you on a down by down basis. So we'll see. Chandler Wooten, also on the roster, someone who probably would make the team right now. Played 9 games last year. It was a core special teamer. 56% of the available special team snaps in those games that he played. He played in them. You would expect him to be back. And he's also someone who maybe develops into a good linebacker in the NFL. He was a better college player at Auburn than Brandon Smith was at Penn State, if we're being honest. If you watch the Auburn Tigers at Penn State and the Lions, Chandler Wooten helps you on special teams and has shown in the past, at least in college, in the SEC, that he can help you as an every down linebacker. So that's someone I'm interested to see what his development looks like, because I do like Chandler Wooten, think he's a good player, and feel like he would probably be on the roster. Now, the other guys that are also going to be there during training camp, got Aaron Mosby, who's back, got Jordan Thomas, who's a good story. And then you also have Ace Ely out of Georgia Tech, who I really loved what he did last year with the Yellow Jackets. And that's somebody I would love to see who ends up making the practice squad if possible. But looking at it right now, it looks like Shaq Thompson, Frankie Luvu, Kamu Greer-Hill, Brandon Smith, Chandler Wooten. Oh, yeah, and Bumper Poole as well at linebacker. That's another person who, if Smith doesn't show you enough, Bumper Poole is someone who could come out there and take his job. Like, nothing is given. Like, we got drafted in 4th round last year. Typically, you're going to keep 4th round picks. But for him, Barno, those are 2 guys that, hey, man, we got some other guys. We might not have draft. For Barno's case, they did draft someone out of position. At Brandon Smith's case, they didn't. But they brought in some younger guys who have performed at a higher level than you have back in the college game. And that may provide more, like in special teams, than you have so far. So don't get cut, man. And I'm not sitting here saying he's going to get cut. I'm just saying that there's some players out there like a Jordan Thomas, maybe like Ace Ely, or really Bumper Poole, who could come out here and make this roster. I think at least Bumper Poole is probably a practice squad guy for the Panthers and could have a role on this team down the road. That's exciting player that they got as a UDFA that could help out. All right, so that's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, hosted by yours truly, Julian Council. Again, y'all, make sure to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter at Julian Council, where in 2 weeks on the 21st, the weekly Friday mailbag is back here. It will be the only chance that you get to ask questions heading into training camp. So get those questions in over the next couple of weeks. So either at me or DM me in order to do that. In the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole. As always, keep pounding. And I will talk to you on Monday, where I believe we'll be talking about the cornerbacks. Is that what we're doing? Yes, cornerbacks. We'll be talking about cornerbacks on Monday. JC Horn, Dante Jackson, can they stay healthy? Please, fingers crossed. Hope that happens. Talk to y'all then. Enjoy your weekend.